Hi, Charles SirBookSage here, and season 2 of The Wheel of Time is premiering in under a week. We're going to be getting our first 3 episodes. And I wanted to talk quickly here about a change they made in season 1 from the books to the TV show that I really didn't like when I first watched the show. But I've actually been rereading book 1, The World, and I've been rewatching season 1, kind of in preparation to re-immerse myself in what they did before season 2 starts. And I've been really thinking about changes from book to live action when it comes to just adaptations in general. And I wanted to talk about that here briefly. And I want to highlight a scene from season 1 that was not in book 1 that I've actually come to understand and accept, and another scene from season 1 that wasn't in book 1 that I think is just utterly horrible and the worst possible kind of changes you could make. So let's get into it. In book 1, after they're all separated at Shadar-Logoth and they all have to flee that city, Rand and Mat eventually find their way to Caemlyn. Now, Caemlyn is the capital of Andor, which is technically the Two Rivers and Emond's Field are technically part of Andor, even though they don't consider themselves to be, but they really are. And this is where the Lion Throne of Andor is, and Queen Morgase sits on the Lion Throne. And they end up going to Caemlyn because they figure the rest of the group is going to show up there at some point. It's the obvious place to make for. While they're there, this is where they see Logain being paraded through the streets. This is where Rand meets Loyal, the Ogier. And part of while he's in Caemlyn, I think when he's trying to get a good look at Logain, Rand scales this wall. And he ends up tripping and falling off the back of the wall. And he finds himself inside the royal palace grounds of the royal palace of Andor, where the queen lives. And he ends up meeting Elayne Trakand, the daughter heir to the throne of Andor, and her brother Gawyn Trakand, and their half-brother Galad Damodred. And Elayne, Gawyn, and Galad, they play a big role in the whole rest of the story in the books. Elayne more so than the other two, because she's a critical player in this whole story. The TV show just cut all of Caemlyn out. And they did this because they decided to have Tar Valon and the White Tower in season 1. And we don't go to Tar Valon in book 1. We don't see Tar Valon until book 2, The Great Hunt, which season 2 is mostly going to be focusing on. When I first watched the show, I was really annoyed that we didn't get Caemlyn, because Rand meeting Elayne is kind of an important scene, and meeting Gawyn and Galad as well. But Elayne, when she goes to the White Tower in book 2, she already knows Rand. She's met Rand, she has a connection to him. And that plays a role in Elayne's choices and chances she takes in her early part of her story. And her having already met Rand and being kind of fascinated with the memory of him, and meeting Nynaeve and Egwene, who she learns are from the same place as Rand, gives Elayne an instant connection to them. And it's one of the things that kickstarts their sort of friendship. So I found it really curious that the show would just eliminate all of this from season 1. However, if you really think about that whole Caemlyn passage, Caemlyn itself really isn't critical to have on the TV show. Is it important to the overall story? Generally, yes. Is it important to Elayne? Generally, yes. This is the kingdom she's supposed to, or queendom, if you will, she's supposed to inherit. However, Tar Valon and the White Tower is far more important to this overall story than Caemlyn. So you're talking about a TV series that has 8 episodes a season, and who knows how many seasons they're going to get. I think the showrunner says he's kind of envisioned telling this whole 14-book series in 8 seasons. So 8 seasons, 8 episodes, you're dealing with limited real estate. And the show is going to have to take a long, hard look at locations and characters in that 14-book series that the show is just going to have to cut, because you're just not going to be able to do their stories justice in any real way. And the story, ultimately, if you're going to have to trim down so much of 14 books, you're talking about over 10,000 pages. There are things that are just going to have to be cut just to tell a coherent story in any real way. And in the end, putting Tar Valon in season 1 giving us the White Tower, the Caemlyn seat, showing us all the Aja factions, and kind of beginning to see the machinations and politics at the White Tower, is really far more critical to this story as a whole than getting to see Caemlyn. I don't believe we're going to be getting Queen Morghase's plot from the books. Her whole sort of journey that she's taking is a subplot throughout the story. I don't think we're getting that in the show, because if you think about it, with this limited real estate the show is going to have, that plot isn't really necessary. It's not central to this story. And to be quite frankly, I don't know if we're going to get Gawain Trakand in this story. We are getting Galad. We've seen that there's been some casting stuff for Galad, though he was listed as Galad Trakand, very interestingly, instead of Galad Damodred. Whether that was just a mistake on the part of the person listing the casting, or they're just going to be combining these two characters for the TV show, which would not surprise me in the least. And if you have to cut either Gawain or Galad, Gawain's the one who's going to go. Am I going to be happy about that? No. Are there a lot of book readers who are going to be unhappy if they do that? Yes. However, these are the types of things that are just going to happen in this show. And I'm not making excuses for the bad changes in season 1. There was a lot in season 1 that I have a big problem with. And this is just talking first about removing Caemlyn and putting in the White Tower. Because the other important things that happened in Caemlyn in the books, Logain being paraded through the streets, Rand and Mat and them seeing him, meeting Loyal, the Ogier, I believe he's introduced in Caemlyn in the books as well. They took all those events and moved them to Tar-Valon on the TV show. So all those other things still happen in the TV show, they just happen in Tar-Valon instead. But I am really curious to see how they're going to present Elaine in season 2, with her not having met Rand yet. That's going to be a little bit different to her character. So it looks like Elaine's going to meet Rand in season 2 during the finale. So instead of her meeting this sort of gangly, kind of awkward kid from the Two Rivers, this sort of sheep herder, she's going to be meeting Rand al'Thor, the Dragon Reborn, which is a very different thing, a very different meeting, a very different dynamic established for these two characters up front. So that's an interesting change, and I'm curious to see how the show's going to handle it when we get there. But I don't want to get ahead of myself here. I'm actually doing a live stream tomorrow, Sunday, August 27th, 3 p.m. Eastern, where I'm going to be, it's kind of a part 2 follow-up to my live stream about season 2 that I did 2 weeks ago. I'll link that up here if you want to watch that before you hopefully join me for my live stream. I hope I see you in the live chat tomorrow at 3 p.m. That is the kind of change I'm going to be also looking for in season 2, where it just makes logistical sense. Now, another change that they did in season 1 that I just did not like at all was pretty much episode 5. Episode 5 is mostly made up for the show. I believe that's the episode after Logain's been gentled and an Aes Sedai's been killed, and then they go to Tar-Valon. The other water kills himself, in the White Tower, and they have this ceremony, and we see the character of Lan, Almandragoran, just eviscerated in front of our eyes. Because if you haven't read the books, Lan is very stoic. Take every stoic character you've ever encountered in any story ever, roll them up into one, times that by 10,000, and you're getting close to like this sort of granite stoic Lan from the books. He keeps everything kind of bottled inside. And for the TV show to give us this Lan, this is nothing at all like the character in the books, like not even remotely like the character. And that's the kind of change that really frustrated me about season 1. Nynaeve also trying to just stone cold murder Lan when she shows back up after we realize she wasn't killed by the Trolloc. I mean, that is not Nynaeve at all. And Nynaeve was far and away my favorite thing about season 1. But there were parts of Nynaeve that were just horribly, horribly written in season 1. Mat as well. I mean, they did Mat dirty in season 1 as far as I'm concerned. I'm hoping we don't get these drastic characterization differences in season 2. I already know Nynaeve is going to be kind of training with a sword, which is way out of character for her. But I'm hoping that's limited as much as possible in season 2. Because that whole scene, I get it. It was emotional. You get to look at the waters kind of behind the curtain. But this is not what you do with this character this early in this show. You know, Lan and Nynaeve is a very slow burn throughout this story. And part of this interaction is Lan has this he's this wall of granite. And Nynaeve is like trying to find like little cracks and little holes. And so for like Lan to just be wailing in front of her here in season 1 is just kind of absurd. But then again, they had them already sleeping together by the end of season 1. So this show isn't even remotely sticking to the some of these sort of character journeys together. They're really speeding some parts of it up. I wanted to touch base on those two things, a change that I've come to accept and understand, and things I probably expect to see a lot more of. And then the other kind of change that is just, let's make this a completely different character for the show. I hope we get far less of that in season 2. And I just kind of wanted to touch base here, let you know about my live stream tomorrow. There's so much to talk about with this book series. If you have never read The Wheel of Time, it's one of the great fantasy series of all time. Highly recommend it. Absolutely worth the journey. It sticks that landing, and that's not an easy thing to do, to stick through a 14-book series and have it pay off in a very satisfying way. The question is, can the show replicate that? Again, there's so much of it has to be condensed down to such a tighter story. There's a lot of emotional buildup that the show's just not going to be able to do. So I don't know if it's capable of having the same emotional payoff that the books have in certain moments. Like, there's a scene, I'm not going to spoil it for the non-book readers here, that's deep into one of the last books, you know, and you know the scene when Nynaeve is calling out some of the Valkyrie, you know, will he ride alone? I'm already getting like emotionally welled up just thinking of that book moment. How in the world is the show going to build up to that moment in the books in any realistic way, with it already taking some of the shortcuts with these character journeys that they're taking? 3 episodes are premiering Friday, September 1st. I'm going to be watching those. I'm going to be making videos about this whole upcoming season, kind of breaking down my thoughts about each episode as they happen. I've just recently reread books 2, 3, 4, and 5. I had to stop myself at the end of book 5 because I was sucked back into the story already. I look forward to seeing you in my live stream tomorrow. I want to hear what you think about what's coming up in season 2, because there's been a lot of interesting tidbits revealed in these cast interviews that have been published recently. And with that, look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I am Charles, this is SirBookSage. Happy reading.